That step there is a little tricky. I saw Richard do it. I thought he was joking, but then I almost did it. Next, we're going to start our next panel right away here, and it's called The Benefits of Collaborative Safety Programs, something that I'm very involved in and kind of a passion of mine. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce the panel, starting with my co-moderator, Jeffrey Vincent, the Vice President of Safety and Technical Training for the ATO, followed by Mike Blake, the National Voluntary Safety Reporting Programs Representative for NATCA, Ernesto Lasen, the General Manager for Safety Programs from the ATO, Chrissy Padgett, the National Partnership for Safety Representative from NATCA, John Kunowski, Chicago Center Local Safety Council Lead for NATCA, and Mike Schilz, Safety Information from ALPA. And it's a great panel. Before we get going, I just wanted to say a few words. Since 2008, when ATSAP was first implemented in the Chicago area, and since, it has basically fundamentally changed how safety and how reporting and everything is done within the agency and within the air traffic world. We have ATSAP X, we have the ASAP for the federal contract towers, we have Aircraft Search Safety Reporting Program, and all of that has led into many more programs. Partnership for Safety, Recurrent Training, Confidential Information Share Program. We give information to all kinds of different programs to make sure that those programs have the information that they need to make the right decisions about safety problems. So we're going to discuss a little bit about that on this panel. And with that, I would just like to invite the panelists to say a little bit about themselves, starting with Jeffrey, and we'll move this way, and then we'll get on with the panel.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Steve. Currently, my position is Acting Vice President of Safety and Technical Training. I've been in that job now for about 10 months. An absolute wonderful experience, get an opportunity to work with wonderful people like the people here on this panel. I have about 33 years of experience in the agency, a lot of different jobs. A lot of that time was spent in the safety world. So very privileged to be a part of this panel this afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Mike Blake, I'm the NATCA Voluntary Safety Reporting Program Representative. Been lucky enough to be involved with voluntary reporting since we kicked it off in 2008. As part of that work group, and going to Chicago and getting our very first report was clearly something I didn't expect as quickly as we did, and it was really, since then it's been quite, I guess, really kind of cool to be participating in this program. About 30 years at Boston Center as a controller. Presently still assigned there, but working full-time on VSRP programs, and really enjoying it. Thanks.
Ernesto Lasen, GM Safety Programs up at headquarters, AJI 11. 30 plus years doing this air traffic gig. And before that, I was in the Air Force for almost 9 years. Been very inspired by a lot of these people since I've been in this program. Actually, I didn't know what to expect when I first came on. I didn't have the privilege a lot of these guys had coming into it at the beginning of it, but for me, I think I've caught up fairly quickly with the belief in safety and what we do there. There's a lot that you know, there's a lot that you don't know that it's done, and ways contribute, and that's what keeps me going in the program, and I believe it's what keeps everyone else here going too.
Chrissy Padgett, I'm the NATCA Partnership for Safety Representative. I'm a controller at Washington Center, and I've been in the agency for about 19 years. So I've been with Partnership for Safety for about 4 years now, and just in that short amount of time, it's just been really exciting to see that grow, and just being a part of all the different safety programs.
I'm John Kunowski, a graduate of the University of North Dakota and an air traffic controller at Chicago Center in the West area. I'm also our NATCA safety lead for Chicago Center's Local Safety Council. I've really enjoyed my time with the Local Safety Council so far, and I'm looking forward to being part of this panel.
Hi, my name is Mike Schilz. I'm an A320 captain at Delta Airlines. I represent the Airline Pilots Association at ASIAS. Graduated of the Air Force Academy because my grades weren't good enough to get into Wisconsin. And I've been coming here for 5 years. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here last year because of a scheduling conflict, but I am really glad to be back with you folks. I really enjoy coming out here and spending time with you.
So up on the screens, you see the thing. If you want to ask questions, don't forget slido.com and you use that hashtag NATCA CFS. But to get things started, Mike and Ernie, what do we do with all these programs? What does ATSAP and ATSAP-X, where does all that information go? What do we do with it? And what has been done with it?
So I'll start off by saying all that information just doesn't go into a database. All that information actually goes into the differences within the teams, training, different structures, different events, different collaboration aspect, teams that you'll see come out, different emphasis and issues that come up within the entire FAA. So we touch a little bit on a lot of different programs, which benefit a lot from the plethora of information that's contained within our database. I mean, we have just so much, or have acquired so much in safety since the inception of the program, that we provide information for things like the top 5, things like ODO, teams making differences and trying to make changes, procedural changes, changes within the .65. There isn't much that we don't have our hands in, or that this information impacts. And that's what we do with this information. It just doesn't go into a black hole. It actually gets recycled, so to speak, into the information, to the daily information that you receive and benefit from.
So I'll start out with some formal statistics for you guys. Let's see, we have about 185 formal corrective action requests. About 112 of those are pretty close to resolution, if not already being resolved. We have over 165,000 ATSAP reports that have been filed, 95,000 reports that we've shared with airlines through our SIS program. And, and those are all the formal statistics. I think the cool part about it is that informally, we probably couldn't keep up with statistically how many things are being resolved at an informal level, and just basically getting an email or a phone call from an ERC or from a SIS analyst to a facility to have them take a look at something that's been reported. A lot of times it just takes just that little push, and things are informally resolved. So, I mean, as far as what's being done with that information, I can tell you that we have examples such as weather radar, weather issues in the Caribbean and over the Atlantic. We never were able to display convective weather over that area, and through information received from ATSAP, the agency and through the tech center came up with a pretty innovative fix where they could actually show lightning strike data and to assist us on weather information on the glass. That was cool. It all came out as a result of ATSAP and that type of reporting. We also have an example of trying to keep Mike and his flight crews out of special use airspace that may have been a problem with folks having to deviate into those areas during convective weather. We have examples in ATSAP-X. We have a frangible bolts and mountings issue that was resolved, where frangible bolts were used on aircraft landing systems and as well as lighting systems. So a lot of the information that we use has certainly made a difference so far in the 10 years that we've been involved with voluntary reporting, and those are just a few examples.
Thanks. So, Mike, they talked about the Confidential Information Share Program, the SIS program that Mike said, but you also mentioned a program called ASIAS. What does ASIAS stand for, and what is ASIAS?
Okay, it's Aviation Safety Information and Sharing. It's an FAA-sponsored program where all of the ASAP reports that pilots write, which are pilots' version of ATSAP reports, all of the FOQA data, which is like flight data recorder data, all of that data plus 60 other inputs are put into a data warehouse, and we use that information to run studies to see how safe the system is. We do it to do risk analysis. We do it to help when you guys are building airspace. We do it to try to give you a heads up as to where the problems might be. It's a pretty substantial program. I don't know if you've ever heard of InfoShare. We sort of get a lot of the information as to what we should be looking at from InfoShare, where airlines and organizations come to talk about things that they found that maybe weren't going so well, what they did to fix it, and if that fix worked. And we share all that information twice a year. Every airline that has a FOCA and ASAP program are supposed to participate in those programs. So, and SIS is very involved in the InfoShare process. So that's Mike Blake and I are on the issues and analysis team, which is where all the work really gets done, as opposed to as opposed to the executive board, where you guys have the better snacks at your meetings, but
We have good snacks.
Well, no, and part of that too is, I mean, we've got the directed studies. We do the pilot controller communications directed study. We've got some pretty in-depth directed studies on RNAV arrivals and departures. So there's been some good stuff that we've been able to actually sort of amend procedures and make changes and make the system more safe.
We're in the middle of a study right now looking at go-arounds. Why, when it's apparently obvious to pretty much everybody that they should have done a go-around, why they don't do a go-around, and why, when a go-around does occur, there's a pretty good chance it's going to look like an airshow maneuver. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that right now. So that's just one of the studies we're doing.
So Steve, another question that I'd like to kind of put forth to our panel here. You gave the statistics about the VSRP programs being implemented in 2008. So looking back, prior to VSRP programs being implemented in the facilities, certainly understanding that we still have some growing to do, we're certainly getting better every day. But comparing that to prior to the VSRPs as to what it's like now inside of a facility with having the VSRP programs.
Oh.
I'll get that at one.
Well, I would say that back in the day, 2007, before that, during a pretty contentious labor management relationship, it wasn't pretty. Clearly, we were worried about the 3-strike rule and other things that could come down the pike on you. As a matter of fact, if you had 3, I think, operational errors is what we called them at the time. So, I mean, that certainly didn't help things along, and it certainly didn't help our reporting culture, where people basically, used a rubber ruler or waited 15 days to say anything about what they just saw. So, I mean, as far as where we were and where we've come, I think that through the voluntary reporting programs, the reporting incentives have certainly helped us in that it doesn't allow for any disciplinary or punishable actions being taken against someone who wants to report. So I think that it's pretty much night and day, Jeffrey. I mean, I think you were there too, so.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking at where we were then and where we are now, I think we would all agree that we're certainly in a much better place where we are now with our voluntary reporting.
So we've talked a little bit about CISP and SIS, and that's where everything kind of goes towards the airlines and we interact with the airlines. Where else does that information go? Chrissy, I know we have recurrent training, we have all these other programs, but Partnership for Safety is certainly a important program and how we share that information back to the facilities. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so just a quick, information about what Partnership for Safety is. So it is a collaborative program, and it is the mission of it is to identify and mitigate safety issues or concerns at the local level. And we do that through local safety councils. So local safety councils are in place at every FAA facility. And they are, even there, that's a collaborative program. At least one NATCA member and one member of management are on it at the minimum. They can have additional people as well. And so what we give them access to is, there's 2 things. The first thing is the safety data portal. So that's where we're involved with the MITRE Corporation, maintains that and supplies the information for that. So that database has, I think the biggest dashboard that a lot of the LSC members use and find useful and hopefully take advantage of is the ATSAP MOR Combined Reports dashboard. So that's where LSC members can go in, log into the database, and they can see any ATSAP reports that have been filed or submitted by someone from their facility. So they can see all of that data there. If the submitter chooses to, once you see it now, once you submit, there's a required question when submitting an ATSAP, if you want to share that ATSAP de-identified narrative back with the local safety council. So if they see that, then they can also, once inside the dashboard, the LSC member can also see any de-identified narrative and recommendation if one was submitted. So it's a lot of great information, great data. We're actually in the process now of adding CIS pilot reports. So if a pilot files an ASAP that has to do with your facility, then you can see that as well. So that's in the very infant stages, so we're still working on that, but that is something that's going to be coming out. And you know, we just want, if there's information out there, if there's data available, we want to put it back to the facility. So we do that through, again, through the local safety council. And I think we find that very beneficial. It's giving them as much data, as much information as possible, whether it's they're not sure if they have any issues right now, it seems quiet, so they can go into the safety data portal and see, okay, what's trending? Are we spiking higher than we have the last few months? Okay, yeah, let's look into that. Why is that? Or if there is a known issue, they can still go back into the safety data portal just to get that supporting documentation and information there. And, you know, I think, you know, we can see that, and that's, you know, we have John here, because John's done great things amongst many other local safety councils across the country, but, you know, specific mitigations that you were able to work on, if you want to share something that you guys have done.
Sure. Well, thank you for saying that we've done great things. I know we've been working on one for sure lately. Initiated with automated pointouts, which was a feature that came out in ERAM about a year ago. And the local safety council was a little bit nervous when we first heard about the feature becoming available based on some of the stress that was encountered when the VCI went live, which is a relatively small change. But when the automated point-out feature became live, we saw a lot of deviations from what we would consider to be legitimate use of the automated point-out. And it didn't take very long for the ATSAP reports to come into that safety data portal that PFS provides. And we saw, I'm not even going to kid, we saw dozens of ATSAP reports about various misuses of automated pointouts. So that became one of our highest priorities at the Chicago Center Local Safety Council. While we were working on that, we communicated with Chrissy and PFS and also talked to the other local safety councils from the centers around us, since they also had the same feature, to see if they were experiencing the same issues. Michelle at Indianapolis Center was very concerned as well, so she and I chatted or emailed back and forth many, many times. I also talked with Bob at Kansas City Center and Minneapolis Center as well, with Brittany. And everybody had some more insight about what they were experiencing, what they've done to mitigate the issue, what guidance they've been given. And it took us quite a while because we are a part-time entity, the Local Safety Council, but we were able to, between the management official Local Safety Council, which is John Etherington, who's the acting air traffic manager now at Chicago Center, he and I, along with the Safety Council and our Airspace Procedures Department, we collaborated with them, with Sam Pastialis and Joe Bosick. We also collaborated with Toby Hawk, our NATCA FAC rep, and Dave Scafidi, our air traffic manager. We told them about some of the data and the concerns that we'd seen, and they were sort of behind us the whole way. So we were able to get support from management, from NATCA, from all of our area leadership teams to try to work on that. And it all really started with our own observations and the surprising number of ATSAP reports that we received on the subject of automated pointouts.
And I think that's great too, that you talk about just collaborating not only internally in your facility, but also reaching out to other LSCs, you know, around you and working with them.
It was a great experience. I'd been in touch with all of our local safety council leads in the centers around us, and it was great to see that Michelle especially, I'm sorry to call her out, but she was very supportive, and she actually kept tasking me, kept reminding me that I hadn't told her anything in a while, because we promised we would share whatever we had. So it was great to work with all of them to get the information they had, to take that into account and see if we wanted to adapt some of the procedures that they had already adapted, or at least to be aware of it so we could educate our own controllers about it. And Bob in Kansas City Center did the same thing. He gave us a copy of his addendum to their SOP or addendum to the 7110, which again gave us more ideas to see if it's something, how we want to proceed along the path. And not just, like I said, not just with the other safety councils, but with other groups within Chicago Center. When we worked with Airspace and Procedures, it complicated the process a lot because we thought we had a finished product when we made a 40-slide presentation. Well, they rightfully found a lot of errors or things that we overlooked, and it was great to be able to work with them to address all of those. It was a painful process for us, and I'm sure for them too, but in the end, it came out with a better and stronger product.
I think one of the rubs that we received initially and throughout, first couple years or so, was that it appeared as though ADSAP was retaining the data and keeping it in a vault somewhere, and we weren't really sharing it back to the workforce or back to facilities. And I think that this program now has actually gotten us well beyond that. And that information that folks file at their facilities and allow their local safety councils to review, that's the type of information that your local SMEs, your local guys that know how your operation works, you're able to work on it and solve your own internal issues. And now when we're going to roll the CISP information into that whole program as well, I think that it just gives some great feedback to the users of the system, and it's going to be great. I want to put a plug in too and maybe you were going to say something about it anyway, Ernie or Chrissy, was our discussion sheets. And maybe having more dissemination of our discussion sheets and making those more readily discussed than we are at this point.
I was actually going to bring it in a roundabout way there. One of the questions I didn't want to let go, there was a question there that kind of scrolled through really fast, and so all of a sudden it kind of came fast and furious there. But one was the impact on controllers, ADSAP has on controllers, and something about the impact in regards to the safety culture itself and its influence. Fact of the matter is, it really has led to better collaboration, and through that collaboration, it's brought these people together in the facility. So a lot of the old disputes have happened. The facilities that really have active LSCs, and facilities where people are talking in their work groups and getting the information, and facilities where the discussion sheets are being presented properly, and where this dynamic's going on between management and the workforce, those discussions are happening, those relationships are forming, that collaboration is happening, those ideas are flowing, and both sides are listening to each other in ways where they haven't before. So you have people in these facilities actually openly discussing topics that they didn't before, where really they're identifying the little things that are making the big differences in safety. Because a lot of times when we identify something big that has happened or something that becomes high profile, it all stems from something small. It could even be just a few words that somebody neglected to say or didn't say because they didn't feel that confidence. And within that's all part of that safety culture. We're trying to get away, and we have gotten away from that blame culture, now gotten into this safety culture where we are looking more into that just culture, into reporting culture, into learning culture. We're looking to learn from each other and have those discussions. And that's where those discussion sheets come in also. We're telling you, these are items that are trending right now. This is happening. We're not picking these things from the air. This is something that's actually happening. We don't want it to happen to you, so therefore this is what we want you to approach in your own way, in some way that it makes sense to you and your facilities. So, and through that, the delivery of that comes through those LSCs, and that's that relationship that all these safety programs have. Because a question that I get asked quite a bit is on voluntary safety reporting, is PFS part of that? You don't report anything PFS. They're not a voluntary safety reporting program, but they're a partnership for safety. They benefit and in turn benefit you from all the information that they take and are able to put into the process, into that portal that benefits everybody within safety. And again, it's all about identifying those little things, having those discussions, forming those relationships that we didn't have before. As Mike mentioned before, that culture that came out of people not talking, people not getting along, to where we are now, and regardless how the conversation takes place, whether it's nice or whether it's robust, it's taken place, and we're able to walk away from those conversations with something we can all work with and benefit from. I'm sorry.
So, we know Ernie likes to talk. So once he gets the mic, it's hard to take it away from him. So you got to find your in. So I'm going to take that in right now. So there's some really good questions on here, and they're up behind us now too. And I wanted to pose the first one, and we'll start with Mike. I think Mike has been around, both Mikes, because I want to see what they do on the pilot side, because I know it's an issue. It's not just ATSAP-X. It's a voluntary safety reporting. It's an ASAP. It's an ATSAP. It's an ATSAP-X. And it's not just managers, right? And it says, you can read it. It's how do you respond to managers who won't embrace the safety reporting culture and say things like employees just put in a VSRP report to cover themselves for screwing up. And I'm going to pose it to Mike Schilz first here from a pilot viewpoint, and then go to Mike Blake, and then we can go over wherever you want after that.
Okay. You know what's nice about just being an airline pilot? My boss has a boss. So if my boss has a poor attitude about a safety culture, I can go to his boss. Because somewhere I'm going to hit the right guy or gal who actually has the right safety reporting culture embedded in them.
That's actually a good question right there.
And they're going to make it work. Because right now they have to. Okay? We're in a business where it just takes one screw up. Okay? I'm working like I said, a working group on go-arounds, because we only have to mess up one of them, and our airline is going to be hurting. The industry is going to be hurting. Okay? It only takes one. And maybe it's just easier for me because the culture I'm working in, but if you've got a manager above you who isn't embracing a safety culture, go find one that is.
That's just way too simple.
So I think, I'm sorry, Mike, you?
Go, it's Mike Blake now. Go.
Tell me how that's impossible.
So I think we follow that same straw man to some extent in that, and by the way, ATSAP-X, it's great to have you guys on board. It's taken a long time for us in ATSAP. We're 10 years in, and believe it or not, we still run into these issues. And I think you guys are much newer than that. So it does take time. It does try to get that culture flipped around. But I think that we, in what we've done in the other voluntary reporting programs, is follow that same sort of path that Mike spoke to. Clearly, our ERC members can certainly speak to their peers about that type of a statement being made about the reporting there at those offices or those facilities. But I also believe that the program office also at times can step in, as well as even Jeffrey in his level, that can actually try to, I guess, speed along that cultural shift that needs to occur so that people feel safe in reporting what they believe to be a potential disaster situation. So I think Mike's got it nailed. We try to follow that same process in elevating the issue to make sure that people are playing the game the right way.
So certainly, Mike, that's something that we talk about every opportunity that I get to address our audience about those types of things. I do my very best to talk about that. That's one of the things I want to see. I saw one of the questions came across was a goal of the next 10 years, and that's certainly one of the things that I would like to see, is that this is more openly embraced, and that we're having those conversations. As I said earlier when I asked the question, I know we still have a ways to go. There's still some growing that we have to do. So that's certainly one of the things that I would like to see over the next 10 years, is that we come closer together from a management, from a bargaining unit side, and have those conversations more openly.
Oh, I didn't want to leave Steve out either, because we would go to Steve as well and let him know that we have issues potentially at some offices as too. So I guess we try to hit as many places.
They're always fun. So I think we should take another question here. I think they're really good. So and it just went off. What was that top one that talked about technology? Do any of the safety programs take into account technology and process, and they become more difficult, and how do we deal with that? Do any of the safety programs kind of measure that? Do they take it into account in the reporting? And anybody want to take that?
Sure. I think that we get reporting on this. We have actually implemented some processes through the Metroplex process to try to be on site during those procedural changes. We're working with the Datacom groups. We're working with the human performance teams to try to work through what pressures are being put on our workforce all the time. So I think that actually the Metroplex process, we use it more of in a tactical sense, where an ATSAP report will come in and we'll have a service area rep there that can actually take that to the implementation team and try to work through that and resolve issues like right away. So we are working it through the technology as well as procedural pieces. CPDLC is an issue that we're dealing with. We certainly have the Datacom rollout now in Kansas City and I guess Indy and Memphis. We are getting some reporting on that. What's interesting to us is we may not get as many ATSAP reports on those. We get the Ames tickets that are being handled at the local level, but we will be getting some pilot ASAP reports about the issues that they're being faced with as they fly throughout the NAS.
So, Chrissy, is that information available to the facilities?
Yeah, so again, the ATSAP, so if they file an ATSAP, it is. We have in the other dashboards that we have, it's surveillance-based metrics, so that's the radar data, any weather data, so you see a lot of things. Again, it's going on at your facility, you see that information as well.
John, were you able to use that type of information when you were dealing with your auto handoff stuff?
Yeah, we view every ATSAP report that is shared with the local safety council. So yeah, we routinely at our meetings do go through ATSAP reports as well as MORs and OSAs, all kinds of data. But we look at every one of them, at least somebody in the Safety Council does, and we share the more interesting ones or the trending reports that we tend to see, and that's where we'll start to decide if we're going to try to tackle a project to see if there's something bigger happening. So yes, looking forward to getting the ASAP reports.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Getting that ASAP stuff in there is going to be major.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Jeffrey?
Oh yeah, there's a question there for me. It's talking about why will pilot SME voting rights reduced. So I want to take the opportunity maybe to clarify.
Your name changed?
To,
Mr. Vincent?
yes, it did. But I just want to take the opportunity to actually address that and provide some clarity around that. What we did was basically clarify the roles. There's 3 roles on an SMS panel. You have the panel members, you have SMEs, and you have observers. The agency assumes the risk. So at the end of the day, the only person that's signing an SRM document is the agency. So we did not take away pilots' voting rights. We still want that information. We still want pilots there. We want their expertise on the panel. Pilots will participate as SMEs on the panel. But at the end of the day, the agency is the one that's assuming the risk. And the only thing we did was issue clarity around that. We did not take away anyone's rights.
I feel like there will be a follow-up to that.
I think.
So how do, I think probably Mike and Mike can probably answer this question the best. How do controller reporting numbers compare to the number of reports pilots file?
You want to go first?
Sure. It's interesting, though, and clearly it's probably the same issue we have to deal with. It depends on the reporting culture at your airline. It depends on the reporting culture at your facility. But I think so. We get about 320 reports a week throughout our 3 ERCs. I think we get, I'd say probably.
That's just ATSAP, right? We're not talking about
That's
the
just ATSAP reports.
FCC.
That's ATSAP reports. As far as the ASAP reporting side, we have airlines that send us like maybe 100 reports from their own airline for that week. So they have a very robust reporting culture, certainly, and like it just depends on the size of that airline. What's somewhat troubling, and I'd like to have that thrown out there too, is that we have probably about a 15 to 18% ratio of actually matching reports. So what we were hoping for was a higher number of that. And I understand, so to speak, that you're generally going to report what you get in trouble for, and we may get in trouble for different things depending on what end of the mic we're on.
Or what your perception is of what the safety issue is.
Yeah.
Versus just getting in trouble for.
Right. Right, but I mean, you're right. I mean, it's not just to save yourself. It's really if there's a true safety issue that you maybe participated in or whatever. It'd be nice to get that information as well. Sorry, Mike.
No. I can give you Delta's numbers because I just had a meeting with some of the ASAP people there. They go through 24,000 ASAP reports a year. So 2,000 a month. We have 2 ERCs every Thursday that deal with ASAP reports. We have a pretty robust reporting culture at Delta.
So how many pilots do you have at Delta? Did I miss that?
14,200.
And they get 2,000 reports a month. So if you compare just that one airline with the, what do we have, 14,000 controllers, and we get about 1,200-ish?
Well, and it's funny because I've sat in meetings with ALPA guys, and you got 24,000 reports in a year? You guys must really be bad. It's like, I got another guy that doesn't get the program. You know, it's not that we're bad, it's just that we're observant, and we see stuff, and we report it, trying to get it fixed. And quite honestly, I tell guys, I says, that's part of being a professional pilot. It's not just flying the airplane. It's not just talking on the radio. You may be the only 2 people who see something that can keep the next 2 folks coming down the pipe from having to put up with it. So if you see it and you recognize it, report it. It's part of your job. And without stepping on any toes here, you're professional controllers. If you see something going on, I'm here to tell you it's part of your job. It's that important because we only need one.
John, I'm going to put you on the spot because I don't know the answer to this question. Normally, I don't ask questions that I don't know the answer to. However, how does Chicago Center kind of promote reporting within your facility? And do you? I mean, it's just
How do we do what, I'm sorry?
Promote reporting and make sure that things get reported that need to be reported.
Well, we do. Not every month, but frequently in our safety discussions, we include a slide that we've created just saying file ATSAP reports and share them with the local safety council.
So you guys do your safe discussions?
Yes, we include that in our safety discussion to try to get as many reports as possible. We've seen that there's a lot of great information in all of those, so
cool.
Yes, we do include that.
That's good. So there's another good question here, and I want to pose it because is there any formal collaboration between ATSAP and ASAP for specific incidents that involve ATC and the airlines? And I know that there's some really good examples of this, and we didn't just include ATC and the pilots, but we included dispatch and other things. And Mike, you want to kind of outline that? Because I know you were heavily involved in some of those.
Sure. No. Actually, when we get an ASAP report from an airline, or even I'll say that from an airline, the first thing that our analysts do is to actually go and see if we can find a matching ATSAP report. Hopefully, there is something in the system so that we can match it up and get a more 360 view on it. But absent that, we also we have access to many of the other programs. We have Falcon and Cedar and Dollar as well to be able to listen to the recordings and to look at the radar information as well. And we actively try to provide assistance to the airlines, giving them replays and those types of tools so that they can either take it back to in their ERC will review that and actually use it potentially even for some skill enhancement training or some other systemic enhancements that that airline can actually impose and maybe even use that more of a briefing out to their pilots on what to look for at certain instances. But yes, we definitely formally collaborate between the airlines and ATSAP on those specific incidents that occur. And you're right, Steve. I mean, we've involved the dispatchers. We've got reports of navies being out of service, guys being given clearances to a navy that is permanently out of service and trying to come up with a new route. There's a lot of examples out there of us being able to provide them the information and show them maybe better ways of doing business.
How many programs I was thinking of a question here because it kind of popped into my mind, but how many MOUs do we have? How many agreements do we have with airlines, and is it just the pilot groups, or do we have other agreements?
No, we have, I think there's 28 airlines that participate in the Confidential Information Share Program. We have 2 active dispatch organizations that we share information with. We just came back from InfoShare that Mike referenced earlier, and we have not just, I think we have 4 additional airlines now that want to participate in the CISP but we also have a small carrier that operates with 3 aircraft. We look for, we're actually starting to have discussions with the universities in their programs, as well as NBAA wants to develop a relationship with us in the SIS program. So it continues to grow.
Yeah. So a question kind of funny here. How many safety issue ATSAPs need to be filed before the subject is taken seriously? I'm aware of several that have been and no action is taken. So I'm aware of several that I filed back when I was working and no action was taken, mostly because it was my mistake and I filed an ATSAP report. But that's a good question, and I'll let, how about Ernesto? You want to take that?
You read that question again to make sure that I don't get it wrong here. It says how many safety issues ATSAPs need to be filed before the subject is taken seriously. I'm aware of several that have been the first and no action is taken. Actually, it's maybe poorly phrased. All questions are taken seriously, regardless whether they have anything behind them or not. When these questions come into the system, the ERC doesn't see them yet. The ATSAP analysts are the ones who get them, and they're the ones who go through and read and redact and see what the issue is and summarize the issue so to ensure the confidentiality of the person submitting the report. Then after that, it's presented to the ERC, hopefully in session, and when they go through it, they consider every aspect of that report. I know sometimes the impression might be given, because there's always a handful of reports that may take a little longer than others, and that's because there's a lot of research involved. If you think we were talking numbers here earlier, we only have 3 ERCs, for example, for ATSAP. In 17, they did 16,693 reports. For last year, last time I pulled, they did above 14,000. I haven't pulled the latest, but I'm sure it's more or less around the same thing on there. So when you see the plethora of reports, it's not that they're moving through these as a machine, but they're looking at the facts in there. There's a lot of research to be done. Sometimes they go back to the facility and have to obtain more information from the employee. And some of these things, because they might take a monetary solution or other things where the ERCs sometimes have to get creative within their bounds. But whether it pertains to the ERC or not, they're all taken seriously. There's not one report where they just toss it aside. And there's nobody identified to these reports, because the reason for de-identifying these reports when it gets to the ERC is so there's no bias involved. They're just looking at what was reported, the safety action involved, and what needs to be done, if anything.
I would actually turn it around, because I'm aware of several issues where there was only one report and there was lots of action taken. So I mean, it goes back and forth, right? It's all about your perception and how you take that, but it's not one way. There's no set number of reports. There's plenty of examples where only one report was taken in and things were changed because of that one report. Having a trend certainly helps. I mean, I'll tell you that, and I think everybody understands that. Changing a major system or policy or process, procedure based on one report probably isn't going to happen all the time. Showing a trend and dealing with those safety issues by trends is the way to do it.
That's very important.
See, and it's difficult because I know that you guys who participate, you file something, you take the time to do that, and you would like to have maybe a more robust response. And I know that we don't disregard any single report. I know that. We try to retain it, as Steve was saying, maybe develop a trend or whatever. But we do try to take a risk analysis look at the report and to see if our sister or brother ERCs are having anything as well, and then try to move forward on whether or not we act on it.
So I think we have to ask the first question, which is, because it has 25 votes, so it keeps popping up there. It's Paul, it might be my boss, so I gotta kind of, if he asked it, I gotta answer it. Or, oh, take it off. No. So it's how do we compare to systems with more advanced technology such as NAV Canada, and how have our metrics improved with implementation of next gen compared to legacy? And my first question back would be, what's next gen? And what do we mean by that? And we started a discussion between NAV Canada and the US where we would get together and discuss safety issues, and I was part of that. CACA was part of that. The flight service union from Canada was part of that, the FAA, NAV Canada, and we would have some basic discussions about how to work on common safety issues, and we haven't met for a little bit, but we did start working together on those things. It's kind of, I don't know, fallen by the wayside or whatever, but...
Well, the guy that organized it isn't there anymore.
There you go.
So his replacement is trying to gin that up again.
Perfect.
So,
Somebody else better talk. I'm over here coughing.
You know what would be really cool as far as next gen goes, though? Is actually have our selected altitude be able to be displayed on the glass. If we could, our number one reported issue is altitude compliance, altitude deviations. It would be really cool, and I believe NAV Canada has the ability to show that, as well as other ANSPs throughout the world. But it shouldn't take us, we shouldn't be at the back of the pack and trying to show our that type of selected altitude from the
It's just
flight
not
deck.
the top issue for ATSAP, right?
What's that?
It's not just the top issue reported in ATSAP.
Oh no, it's
where
the
else?
top in all types of voluntary reporting.
It's all-
programs.
it's
ASAP
across
as well. I mean, that's our number one reported issue in the SIAS. I mean, it still is. So.
I think Mr. Vincent has a question again, a follow-up.
Uh-oh.
Says the FAA assumes risk for the action, but wouldn't you want the input from the pilots who fly the airplanes experiencing the risk? Absolutely. As I said in my original answer, you know, we want the pilots there. We want the pilots to be part of the panel. They are there as SMEs to give that input. So absolutely, we would want them there, and we want them there. We're not asking them not to be there as part of an SMS panel.
All right. What else do we got? Some of this question is more of to a Tom Adcock or the FDT office. So I'm going to kind of move past those because they deal more with the training side and how they deal with that. Not that we couldn't kind of take a guess, but how can FAA's Safety Review Board, I'm not sure what the Safety Review Board is, identify hazards earlier during the development life cycle for programs like ERAM datacom, such as automated point-outs? So I think I'll start this and we can move from there. But when we rolled out Metroplex, and you talked about it earlier, Mike, when they rolled it out, about 2 or 3 projects in, we started talking and making sure that they get the information back quickly. We put an umbrella of reporting over those programs with ATSAP, and we would go and we'd promote and we would drive that information right back to the leads of those programs so that those programs could take that information immediately and do something with it. And it worked very well. We've tried to do that with other programs. There's a little bit of kickback because there's ownership in AIMS and all these other things that people love, and they want their information in these other reporting programs, which then we end up with these different silos of information and we have different processes to address the same info. It becomes really difficult. But with Metroplex, we were able to kind of drive all that reporting into one process and get the information to where it needed to be, shortcutting actually some of those processes that currently live to make sure that that information was used adequately and immediately.
And we still need to get better. I mean, we just rolled out at Detroit and Cleveland, and we're still getting reports there. We've got, I mean, even through SIAS and CAST and the safety enhancements that they put forward, we can still see where we need to improve our training as far as climb and descent via the phraseology pieces. We're still seeing that again. So we're trying to work through a better way of getting that so we're not at Groundhog Day all over again every time we roll out a new process or Metroplex plan. Can we do that top one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So do we ever see ATSAP reports that would be better addressed in other avenues? Absolutely. I will tell you, though, that the example that you use, we have been very successful in getting new windows in many towers through the ATSAP program. And when I say we, I mean the people reporting have been very successful in getting the attention and getting those windows replaced. Even when the tower is owned by the airport operator, right? And they're not necessarily interested in spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to report them. But when the FAA comes knocking and saying, look, we have a safety issue, and here's the safety issue, it kind of changes their opinion of what they need to, or what their priorities are. So the example is absolutely something that can be addressed through ATSAP. There are other examples that should be addressed through other avenues. We get reports that talk about anything from mold or parking lot issues or rats. I can tie rats to a safety issue because I'm running, and there's nobody sitting at the scope anymore. But spiders, ceilings dripping, and while it's a safety issue and we can tie it to an operational safety issue, some of those things are better addressed through OSHA and other venues, and we certainly do that.
Well, and I mean, you look at the, where was it, Lakefront with the D-Bright or whatever that was installed, right? So was it Lakefront? I can't remember
I
where
don't believe
it was.
it was Lakefront.
Oh, well, it was one. It was,
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking
so
about.
We had an FCT that they needed a D-Bright through their Safer FCT program. We were able to try to help them through that expedite and procure that piece of equipment. Now it's in their tower after a second try. The fell on the floor, but we got them a new D-Bright. So
I don't think we have the people up here to answer number 2. Can a local SOP supersede the national reporting requirements requiring a controller to report to a supervisor instead of having a choice between supervisor or ATSAP? No, they cannot. And it's clearly stated in there, the local SOPs cannot supersede the reporting requirements in the national orders, whether it's the VSRP order or the reporting order. You can't supersede it. You can't change it. You can't require me to tell them. We negotiated that nationally. You cannot change it. I don't know, Jeffrey, you want to say something about that?
No, in total agreement with you, Steve. It is clearly stated there in the order.
So we're kind of running out of time. If we have a couple more questions, we'll do it. What if my coworker needs to be retrained? Recurrent is not fixing the problem. When is the agency going to start performance management? I don't know. Ask them. I got to tell you, performance management is a funny thing, right? And what if my coworker needs to be retrained? What if you need to be retrained? I mean, it's a funny question. We hear that a lot. We get a lot of reporting on Mike needs to be retrained. Mike's not good enough. He needs to be retrained. I sat and watched him have deal after deal. Well, one, our ASAP and our ATSAP programs are confidential, so you don't really know what's going on with that individual, whether the training's going on or whether professional standards are going on, whether other conversations are going on. You don't know about every performance discussion. I mean, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and worry about yourself. Report the issues. You still are required to report safety issues that you're aware of, or make sure that they're reported. But, I mean, it's not a snitch program either, so probably the most important thing.
I'm glad you mentioned professional standards. That might not be appropriate if someone needs to be retrained, but at least it's a good place to start and to talk to somebody. If it gets brought up enough in professional standards, I'm sure that's going to move on from there.
Is it possible for GA pilots to access these reports? I assume these reports mean ATSAP reports or ASAP reports. The simple answer is no. If you're part of GA as SIAS, you might have access to more, which is a new program, a couple years old. They did a test out in Phoenix, and it's expanded past there. I don't know if there's any updates on GA as SIAS that may help them.
Well, I think, yeah, the GAIAT is up and running. They've got, I think, Eric Carter, one of our ATSAP analysts, also participated on that, and he also participated in the pilot program out in Phoenix. So he was able to, I think, at times share trends that he was seeing as well in the Phoenix area and share that through that GAIAT or whoever was handling that demonstration program out there, which I think that they intend on clearly trying to implement nationally now too. So,
Yeah.
So I guess the answer would be yes.
There is something in progress. Sure. Depending on if you're involved in that or not is a different story. I think we're out of time, so I think we should probably wrap it up and thank the panelists and move on to our next panel, and we'll exit the stage right.
Thank you.